Good morning, all. It's a new week. It's Champions League week at Celtic. We're back on the Celtic way with another morning briefing. I am your host, John McGinley, joined by Ryan this morning. Not lots to chat about, Ryan. Really, there's no real news updates from Celtic. There's no transfers in the offing. It's quite a quiet, unassuming week to start to the week, but massive times ahead with the visit of FC Kairat on Wednesday night.
Yeah, the main news Wednesday night, as you said, FC Kairat playing them in the Champions League for a chance to get into the Champions League phase. That's the talking point now. That's the main focus, it's the only focus that we've got because there's no other transfer talk or anything like that. Massive game on Wednesday, first leg. Looking forward to getting back to Celtic Park again. Enjoyed being there on Friday. Thought the atmosphere really picked up towards the end of the game, but I think it'll be a completely different kettle of fish on Wednesday. It's going to be raucous, it's going to be loud, it's hopefully going to be intimidating for the opposition. And yeah, just looking forward to that game. I think all eyes are on that now.
Yeah, certainly is. What about this comment coming in hot from IH Decorating? 10 weeks have passed since he signed a player to improve the starting team. That's his assessment of the summer. It's been a difficult summer on the transfers front, Ryan. Like you say, though, it all gets put to one side at the moment. Brendan Rodgers is also putting it to one side at the moment. Unless there's any late drama over the next 24 hours or so, Celtic are going to have the squad that they have for this tie. Just a reminder, Celtic have until 11 p.m. tomorrow on Tuesday night to register a further 2 players for the UEFA squad submitted on Thursday. This is the squad as it stands. If Celtic are to make additions, some players would need to come out of this, and they're not going to really be taking any of the homegrown players out. All the players in green here are club trained, regarded as club trained, and Luke McCowan is regarded as association trained. There's 8 in total. You need 8 association trained players, of whom 4 need to be club trained. So those players are pretty firm fixtures in this squad at the moment. The rest of it there, as you see, we all know the deficiencies. We all know there's no left winger in support of Daizen Maeda. We all know there's no real left back support for Kieran Tierney. But I think this squad is good enough to beat this team, and I think Brendan Rodgers won't make any excuses for the strength of the squad going into this tie.
Yeah, I think just looking at that squad depth there, I think it's quite glaring how bare the left side is for Celtic. 1 or 2 injuries could totally hamstring, and pardon the pun, don't want anybody getting a hamstring injury ahead of the game. But yeah, it's really quite bare on that side, and reinforcements are required. It doesn't look as if they'll come in before this game, but before the end of the window, there needs to be people in because there's going to be a lot of games that Celtic are playing this season in many competitions. I'm sure we'll talk about another one of the competitions that Celtic are playing in next month as well. The League Cup, obviously, and the next round of that. But yeah, with the squad that they've got, particularly in defence and midfield, I would expect Celtic to get through. They will be the overwhelming favourites in this tie, just purely down to the fact that people are already talking about this is Kairat's biggest game in their history, getting to this stage. They want to get into the league phase of the Champions League for the very first time. Celtic will be the favourites for this, and they'll be expected to go through. So that's a different sort of pressure. I think in some of the games though in the Champions League that actually suited Celtic, particularly against Slovan Bratislava, maybe less so against Young Boys, but they got the job done at the end of that game. But especially against Bratislava, the fact it was that first game in match day 1, they were the favourites for that tie, and they really thrived upon it. I want them to have that same gusto on Wednesday night against Kairat. They're the home team. They'll want to be gunning to get to the league phase of the Champions League and, yeah, go out and do a job, basically.
Now, of course, Celtic had a comfortable win at home to Falkirk on Friday night. We did a live reaction to that, so for the nuts and bolts of that match, you can go out and check that out. I wanted to touch on how Alistair Johnston viewed the game. He seen the game as a kind of precursor because it was under the lights, a bit of a different feeling for the supporters. It kind of hammered home that hunger that some in the squad feel for feeling Champions League football, which we all know has a different feel. It stirs something inside you under the lights at Celtic Park, and that certainly will be the case again on Wednesday night. Alistair Johnston just saying, I think that was exactly what we needed regarding Falkirk. It's a bit of a different atmosphere, a bit of a different feel with a night game. It reminded everyone that this is what it's going to feel like. It's prepared us well for what's to come. The pressure is going to come with a massive 2-legged tie. For the new guys that have come to the squad, there's that hunger. They're not really understanding what it is. They've heard of it, but they haven't felt it. It's a great moment whenever you get to play at Celtic Park under the lights on a Champions League night. You need to make sure you're taking full advantage at home. When you have the conditions in your favour, we have the crowd on our side. I don't think that's something that's lost on us. That's going to be something in the mentality where, okay, if you get one, you've got to keep pushing and pushing. It's going to have to be 90 minutes, and don't waste a single minute of it. Alistair Johnston, eloquent as ever, speaks very well about football, about the context of everything going on at Celtic. I think that set of quotes, if that doesn't get you up for Wednesday night, nothing's going on, because Alistair Johnston is clearly up for it. And what do you make of this kind of relentless push for goals on Wednesday? Because we all know the logistics of travelling to Kazakhstan next week. It's not ideal. It can be difficult. We saw even when Celtic racked up the goals against Astana in Brendan Rodgers' previous spell as manager, they went to Astana and had a difficult night. You know, it wasn't entirely comfortable. It's got to be full throttle on Wednesday. That has got to be what's happening here.
Yeah, I think I've still got the scars of that Astana game, to be honest with you, because Celtic were so comfortable, 5-0 after the first leg, and then the second leg was just wild. It was utter chaos for the 70, 80 minutes, and I think Celtic scored a couple of goals at the end that calmed things down, but before then, there was that second half of absolute madness. For me, I think the objective for this game, or the game that they've got to, the aim that they've got to have for this game is to try and get it finished, or as much as finished in the first leg as possible. Don't bring it into the second leg. I know it's a difficult tie going to Kazakhstan second leg, but if they can use that home court advantage and really put a few goals past Kairat, you've got to remember, as we mentioned, that they'll be doing the journey as well. It's a long journey for them. You're hoping that you can catch them cold, and really, I think that game, I do agree with Alistair Johnson, it did feel like a bit of a dress rehearsal for the Champions League, not due to the quality of opposition, but even just to the atmosphere, the fact it's a night game, the fact you're under the lights as well. I totally agree with him. I can see why that's helped them. I can see why they've gotten a lot out of that fixture, and hopefully they can use that going into Wednesday night's game. Just reading those comments from Alistair Johnson, a guy that's been at the club 3.5 years. He totally gets it. He totally understands what it means to play for Celtic. He's a fan favourite for a reason, not just for what he does on the park, but how he speaks off the park as well. In my eyes, he's another one of the captains on the pitch. You can see he's a member of that leadership group, and it's great to see him coming out with things like that. He's always a safe pair of hands in press conferences as well, because he always seems to say the right things after games as well, which is great.
Yeah, that dual threat, the fullback Celtic have at the moment, Tierney and Johnston, is outstanding. Like, that's an area of the team that I don't feel.
It really was amazing the other night. Yeah. Just seeing the two of them running at opposition. It's like the cavalry's coming on those sides. It's brilliant to see.
Ryan, you can always tell when it's a big week at Celtic, because the comments in the live chat start to get a little bit spicy. Matt C coming in hot again. When is Desmond going to get called out? No recruitment structure. Absolutely pathetic way to run an elite club. Listen, I think there's a lot of people who sympathise with that, with Matt's thinking there. If you want to find out a bit more about why or how Desmond goes about his business and what he does, you can check out last week's Celtic Way Weekly with myself and Hamish. We did a bit of a deep dive into the Dermot Desmond situation, how recruitment functions at Celtic. I wouldn't say we called anyone out, but we just laid out all the information that we could as far as we know it regarding why Celtic have the strategy that they do. So if you want to find out a bit more about that or listen to more about that, then last week's Celtic Way Weekly, which was out last Monday, is definitely the one for you. It's a different style of show to this one. We've also got the Celtic Way Weekly episode 3 coming up later this afternoon when myself and Hamish take a bit of a deeper dive into Kairat as well. Now, I've been speaking to some Kazakh journalists over the last week, Ryan. Not the easiest team to find out information, right? When you Google them, there's a dearth of information in English. It's all in foreign languages, etc. It's not the easiest, but I have had a sense of what this team are all about. A very balanced team, a very cohesive unit, a very consistent starting 11, and I think they're coming to Celtic Park looking for a draw. I think that's their main aim of Wednesday night. I don't think they'll be particularly defensive, but I do think they have pace in these wide areas to potentially punish Celtic on the counter-attack. And as we've seen in the past from Celtic, that transition, defending those transitions, you've got to be really slick and safe with the football, I think, in the opposition half as well, because one slack ball, and I think players with the pace of Satpayev, for example, can hurt Celtic. So certainly something to be wary of on Wednesday.
Yeah, and that kind of rings true. That rang true with Astana 8, 9 years ago, because they had Patrick Tomasi on the wing, who I believe was linked with Celtic after Celtic played against them. These Kazakhstan teams, they seem to, or at least the two that we're coming up against, they have those pacey wingers that you to exploit defences. You expect that with European teams. You expect them to have strong wingers coming into these games, and they're there on merit because of the teams that they've beaten. They've beat to get to this stage. You know, the list of teams that they've beaten is really, really impressive for a team that are sort of making some of their first steps in European football. I don't know too much about their European history, but it's that they're clearly a team that's on the rise. They're a team that I hadn't heard of before Celtic. Or the opportunity that Celtic could come up against them. They seem to be a team on the rise, and they're there for a reason. So they'll have threats, probably all over the park, that could potentially hurt Celtic. But at the same time, you back these players. You back, as much as you talk about the wide players that Kairat have, Celtic's wide defenders are good. You know, we've just spoke about them in Alistair Johnston and Kieran Tierney. I've got no doubt that those two can do a job and be just as good defensively as they are offensively. There's actually an argument at the moment to say that Alistair Johnston, Kieran Tierney are actually Celtic's best wingers at the moment, as well as defenders. So yeah, if that's where they're the strongest, that's also where Celtic are strongest in terms of defending and attacking in those same areas.
That's true. I mean, there was an interesting, and Charlie McGarvey in the chat brings this up, an interesting article in the Celtic Way yesterday where having two attacking fullback leaves us more vulnerable to the counter-attack, particularly Tierney going to the byline. So Alan Morrison of the Huddle Breakdown does a bit of work for the Celtic Way, and he had an analysis article up just on the early games of the season and how he sees things and what some of the underlying data says about it. And obviously notable of how direct and how attacking Celtic's fullbacks are at the moment, needing to be, I think, just because the lack of real creativity in the wide areas otherwise. And it's certainly a point Tierney's going to have to put in his biggest shift of the season so far on Wednesday night. There's no doubt about that. He's been used very much in an attacking sense, but he's going to need to be very much up and down the pitch, and he's hopefully get more than an hour out of him, Ryan, because that's been the only kind of stopping point for Kieran Tierney so far. Fantastic in the first half of matches, but then is having to be substituted a fair amount at the moment.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a worry going into this game against Kairat, especially if, like you said, they are quite strong on the wings in the second half. You know, depending on the way the game's going, they might look to grab a goal and seal a draw. Hopefully it's a little bit more comfortable for Celtic than that, but the fact that Kieran Tierney's came off after 60 minutes in games, it makes me think that there's a role here for Scales on Wednesday night. If Kieran Tierney's ran his race, then Scales comes in. Potentially that means that Scales is on the bench to provide that cover for Kieran Tierney, and you put in Trusty from the start, or Simpson Pusey if he's ready, although I don't think Celtic are going to throw him in straight away. They're just going to gradually integrate integrate Simpson Pusey into the side. So there's already in my head, 2 days out, there's already selection quandaries that I'm kind of going through in my head. But if Celtic can get a good hour out of Kieran Tierney, 70 minutes, or if he can play for longer but maybe not be as swashbuckling as he has been, maybe conserve his energy a wee bit, pick and choose his runs, then it's all about what's best for the team in that position. And I think it just comes back to the lack of depth that they have in that position. I want Kieran Tierney to be as fit for as long as possible, but as Brendan Rodgers said, he's probably, his biggest threat to himself is himself, because of the way that he plays, all that all action style that he has. So I want him to play as long as he can, but I think there's definitely going to be some game time for Scales in that area, particularly in the latter stages, if he does put his all into it in the first half and the opening to the second half.
It does appear that way. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Scales has a spell out on that left flank for a period of this game on Wednesday. And listen, it's not what I would choose. It's just what I think will happen. No. So you can make of that what you will. And just in terms of Kairat and how they're kind of been recently, obviously they were in Slovakia last week, made the long journey back to Kazakhstan for a league match on Saturday. They were 2-0 up in that match. They made 5 changes to their starting 11, so it wasn't a full strength team. But they did bring in on a lot of their starters for the second half, and ultimately they fell to a 3-2 defeat. They let that two-goal lead slip. Their manager wasn't happy after the game. He said, "We have no time to grieve about this result because we are preparing for a very important match in Scotland and have a long journey to make. But it was a disappointing defeat for us. We were a long way from our best defensively and we conceded childish goals. If you're fighting for the league title, you cannot concede goals like this. The players actually carried out the instructions well, except for losing those goals. We knew they would be difficult to break down, but we managed to do it. And then we conceded stupid goals. Childish and stupid, the words he's using to describe his team there. I believe they're making a kind of early trip to Scotland. A point that's been made is like the kickoff time on Wednesday night is midnight in Kazakh time, which is an interesting dynamic as well. We all talk about the logistics and how difficult it is for Celtic, but for them it seems to be even more of an issue. And I think Celtic can get to this team. I mean, for instance, I think one of their centre backs is 37 years old, and I know that brings experience and that brings, you know, the ability to read a game really well, but I think there's an opportunity for Celtic to get at this team on Wednesday. That's just my gut feeling on it. And listen, what do you make of JJ McGarvey's asking, what's your thoughts on Ida not playing on Friday? I'm starting to wonder, is it structure there in Ida that's the issue? 3 strikers played to no effect and Kyogo wasn't amazing beforehand either. I think it's a decent point. Was Ida out of the spotlight on Friday night just to rest them for this game, Ryan? Are you expecting Ida to be straight back in the starting 11 for Wednesday?
I think he will be in the starting 11 on Wednesday. I think he was taken out the firing line after that performance against Aberdeen, and also to safeguard them ahead of Wednesday night's game. Although, if it was me and I was personally choosing, I'd probably play Daiz Maeda through the middle, although there's not really any cover on the left-hand side unless you switch Forrest or Yang and put Negrin out on the right. So there's selection quandaries, but I think just to make it as uncomplicated as possible, I think Ida will play through the middle and Daiza Maeda will play on the left. It'll be a big night for him, and it's an opportunity for him as well if he is starting the game, and I expect him to start the game. If he starts, then it's an opportunity for him to score in a big game, attempt to put a couple of goals past Kairat, and really change the narrative that's forming around Adam Ida, because as much as Brendan Rodgers has took him out of the firing line on Friday, there will be people that are questioning why he didn't come off the bench in that game. People put 2 and 2 together and think, oh, he's out of the team, he might be on his way out. When I don't think it's as brutal as that. I think he was just taking him out of the, just giving him a rest ahead of Wednesday night's game. But you know, he'll be called upon on Wednesday, and I think he's got to stand up and deliver, to be honest. Otherwise, there's going to be even more dissenting voices surrounding him, and that can't help a player who's clearly under pressure. And at least in that Aberdeen game, I felt was sort of melting under the pressure a wee bit, trying too hard to make things happen through the middle. So I want Adam Ida to succeed as much as anybody else, but he's got to do that by. The only way he can do that is by playing well on the pitch and by being in the right place at the right time. He'll have good balls put into the box by the likes of Johnson and Kieran Tierney. He's just got to be on the end of them when those chances do arise.
Here's an interesting thought experiment from Stephen Ray. He's saying our strongest 11 right now would give us a 3-5-2 formation. And I was thinking about it there, and I was like, I don't really disagree with that. Now, I'm not suggesting Brendan Rodgers is going to be switching to a 3-5-2 anytime soon. But when you think about it, I mean, you're thinking about Tierney and Johnston as wing backs, and then a defensive 3. You've got your midfield, and then you probably have Maeda and Ida up front, or some combination of Maeda and maybe Shinyamada up front, something like that. Then that, from the personnel that Celtic have at the moment, that is Celtic's strongest formation, because then you can utilise those wing backs like that. And Celtic don't really have the wing options, I think, right now to kind of justify what is being played by Brendan Rodgers, and maybe that is something he needs to consider. Obviously, the hunt goes on for reinforcements. We want that to happen, but listen, if Celtic end August, I don't think Celtic can persist a whole season with James Forrest as a starter. I don't think they can persist with half a season with Yang as a starter, and then you start to think about, how can we best utilise the players that Brendan Rodgers has got at his disposal?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, 3-5-2, because that would give the wingers even more license, or the fullbacks rather, more license to attack, you know, and overlap as well. I just think I think now is not the time to be changing a formation ahead of a massive game against Kairat. It's a great idea, and I would like to see. Remember, in particular, when Celtic changed to, was it 3-5-2 under Lennon in 2020 with Griffiths and Edward up front, and it was so dynamic because teams were so used to Celtic playing a 4-2-3-1 that when they changed it, I remember in particular there was games against, I think it was Kilmarnock and Motherwell, both away from home. When you change the formation ever so slightly, these teams don't know what to do because you've got you get players playing slightly differently. They're prepared to play them one way and then they play a completely different way. So I'm all for a positional change as long as it benefits the players and gets the best out of them. For me, I would like to stick with a 4-3-3 because I like the wingers getting utilised, but at the moment I don't think the right personnel is there to properly utilise that. So I'm kind of stuck. I'm stuck in between. I'd like to see it, but at the same time, I want to see wingers come in. I think that's my biggest priority. I just want to see more wingers come in to really supplement those areas.
And Natalie McMillan asking, do you think we won't sign anybody until the end of August? Listen, the most important deadline at the moment is tomorrow at 11 p.m. Unless something radical happens in the next 24 hours. I don't have any information to say that it will or won't happen, but the signs and the silence right now would suggest that it's not going to. I think even if someone signs, I don't think it really matters too much in terms of the first leg. It would be for the second leg because I don't think a player's going to sign tomorrow morning, for example, and then be thrown into the starting 11 on Wednesday night. I couldn't see that happening, just the way Brendan Rodgers likes to blood in players from time to time. He likes them to have a few training sessions under their belt as well. So I think the time is gone for strengthening for this first leg. Now, could you sign someone by 11 p.m. tomorrow and then hope to play them in the second leg? Yeah, of course, that's a possibility. But I'm not hearing any. I'm not seeing anything to give me much hope of a signing before tomorrow, Ryan. I have to be honest with you. Hazel Finn asking, do you think there are transfer targets waiting to see if Celtic qualify for the Champions League before committing, or are we just bad at finding/attracting players? Now, Brendan Rodgers was asked about this a couple of weeks ago in a press conference. I don't know if you recall, but he essentially said that he doesn't think it's an issue. He doesn't think that that's a driving factor behind some of the kind of recruitment and action that we've seen across this summer. I think in varying cases it might be a deciding factor here or there. And listen, I still think Celtic will do decent business before now and the end of August. That is my eternal hope, as they say, as Brendan Rodgers has said. I don't think it's necessarily tied to the Champions League. I think if it, and I don't think Brendan Rodgers would really appreciate that anyway. I think he wants a player who's hungry to come and play for Celtic, and develop at Celtic. And Ange has said this in the past. Ange Postecoglou said this in the past as well. That if a player is just coming in for a particular thing at Celtic, then that's not the type of player he wants at the club. So I think there's maybe a little bit too much made of it than kind of warrants. That's just how I see it, Ryan.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I completely agree with Ange Postecoglou. If players are waiting until Celtic get into the Champions League to go to join the club, or whether or not to decide to join, and I think that's the wrong players that you're going for, to be honest with you. There should be enough of a unique selling point, USPs for these players going to Celtic without the caveat of playing playing in the Champions League. I think it's a massive club. It's a great opportunity to play, for a team that dominates most weeks. You're playing under a really, really good manager in Brendan Rodgers too. As much as I think it does play some factor, I think there'll be things happening in the background. It's just that some deals haven't transpired. Brendan Rodgers has made it so clear that he wants new signings through the door. He sounded a little bit annoyed. I listened to a clip of him on the radio, and he did sound a wee bit annoyed. But I think maybe that was more down to the fact that he's continually asked the same question, and he was asked a question 90 minutes. It was asked
I think in that specific scenario now. Yeah, I don't want to call out specific journalists, but I think in that specific scenario, Brendan Rodgers was asked the transfer question by the same journalist before the match. Yeah. And then he was asked after the match if there was any update. And obviously there's not going to be an update between his pre-match interview and his post-match interview. And so I could understand why Brendan Rodgers has lost his patience in that scenario, especially given he also covered it. He's covered it at length so often, and every press conference that he does, even on Friday, he was kind of asked about it, and he said, "Look, I can't keep answering the question on this because simply there's no update to give, and we know that Celtic don't really give public updates on transfers until the deal is done, really. So in that specific situation, I can understand why Brendan Rodgers is showing frustration. And I think it's more to do with, he's the only one speaking about this. He's the only person that can answer these questions, but he doesn't really have the answers, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a wider issue, isn't it? The lack of dialogue from the club, that he's the messenger. So he's the only person that you can really ask. And unfortunately, he'll get that question more than once. And, the journalist has to ask a question at the end of the day. And he got the... He got the brunt of the not Brendan Rodgers' anger, but frustration. But I completely understand why the question was asked, because it is one of the main talking points. Celtic got a Champions League qualifier. Everybody knows the deadline for when a player can come in. I agree with you in saying that I don't think they'd make much of an impact for the home leg, but potentially if you've got a player coming in that's ready for the away leg, then brilliant. You've got another weapon to add to your arsenal. It's the lack of news and transfers that's quite galling, really, because you're on the briefing on Friday and then Friday night, and you've got that Saturday Sunday. I was obviously off on Saturday Sunday, and since then nothing has happened again. You're coming up, it's the biggest game of the season so far, and not to say that the player would make an immediate impact in the first leg if you're bringing them in, but it would be nice to hear that Celtic are far down the road with some signings ahead of what's going to be a very busy season. It's already a busy season. This is Celtic now going to play in their third competition of the season so far, because they've had the Scottish Premiership and they've had the League Cup at the weekend. So it's going to be a busy season. Celtic are going to be fighting on four fronts between now and the end of the season, and they're going to need reinforcements in order to manage that load. You're just hoping that they can come in sooner rather than later, ideally sooner.
Maestro 95 saying the journalists should be going straight to the board. Listen, all I'll say with that is good luck with that. That's all I'll say on that. So I guess it's kind of the excitement is building. Excitement's building for the players. Excitement's building for fans. It's going to be a fantastic atmosphere on Wednesday night, Ryan. That's one thing that I will say about this early season. It has had the ground is fertile for disillusionment, I think, within the support with regard to how is that is voiced that matches right now. There's none of that at matches right now. The fans are still so behind this team, and I think they're behind Brendan Rodgers, and I think that's something that we can at least, that's a good thing going into Wednesday night. The fans are right there for this team to do the job.
Absolutely, and I felt that in the crowd on Friday night as well. Yes, there was a little bit of, a wee bit of moaning and groaning before the game about the lack of signings. People around me were not too happy with the lack of business that Celtic have conducted. But once the first whistle went, there was just a complete togetherness for the team, and I felt the buzz, of watching Celtic coming from the crowd, and then the players were clearly feeding on that buzz that was in the stands as well. It wasn't the greatest attendance, but there was a lot of factors that were going against it. The fact that the game was on the TV, and people had to travel on a Friday as well, Friday night, so people have different plans, etc. But the crowd was there, the crowd was engaged, and they wanted Celtic to go through to the next round. That engagement between the supporters and the players and vice versa is clearly there. You can see it. You can see when the players were celebrating with the fans as well. There's that togetherness already between it, and that needs to be there on Wednesday. And I've got no doubt at all that it'll be there on Wednesday. The Celtic supporters will be willing them on with every single touch, every single pass, tackle, shot. They'll be wanting to get them through to the league phase, and they'll be there for them. I just think it's going to be a special atmosphere on Wednesday night. I feel like we've been building towards this moment, and by the time Wednesday comes, when that Champions League anthem comes on, I think there'll be a buzz about that place. You'll never walk alone. It'll hit different, I'm sure. I'm just really looking forward to Wednesday, if you couldn't already tell, John.
It's a full UEFA night, everyone. It's an official UEFA match. I think the early qualifying rounds are not designated official UEFA games. They don't take over the stadium, etc. But the playoff round is very much within UEFA's purview, and they're going to be all the branding's going to be all over the stadium. The anthem, as you say, it's a proper Champions League night on Wednesday night. That has to be noted as well. Maestro 95, just again bringing him in. The pace of the game is fantastic on Friday. I think that's a good point as well. And Falkirk had their part to play in that. They didn't come to really sit and frustrate Celtic. And again, I thought that pace and intensity in Celtic's performance was really good. Again, and that's something that the fans feed off. if fans see Celtic putting everything into the performance, then they're going to be there for them no matter what. And likewise, if the players are feeling it from the fans under the lights of Celtic Park, they're going to feed off of that as well. It all works in synergy, Ryan. It's very important dynamic of how Celtic function. I think the connection between the fans and the team is arguably more important at Celtic than at many other clubs. Again, on Wednesday, crucial.
Yeah, we've got recent examples of the detriment that the fans, if the fans aren't there and the fans aren't there back in the team, of what that can do.
Even in Brendan Rodgers' first season, when there was all those question marks about Brendan Rodgers coming back to the club, and then there was lots of kind of angst going on around off the club, some of the positions of the board, etc. It did feed its way, and I think there was no surprise that Celtic's form suffered as a result as well.
Yeah, if everybody's on side and on board, then it can be a pretty daunting place, Celtic Park, and it's got to be on Wednesday for Kairat. I want them to feel that intimidation coming into the ground, coming into the stadium, feeling that from outside going in. I think they will. I think there'll be a buzz. I think there's already, despite that Falkirk game being, obviously the most important game is the next one, but that Falkirk game, there was even then. The people that I was speaking to outside the ground, they were all talking about the Kairat game. That's the big one, the Champions League. That's the excitement. That's the main event for Celtic. As much as domestically it's the bread and butter, the main event is Champions League football for Celtic. That's what gets fans excited. They want to see their team play in the top European competition, and in order to do that, they have to get past Kairat. The good thing is they've got a home tie first that they can really hopefully put some daylight between the two sides, hopefully catch them cold, and do most of the work in Glasgow ahead of a daunting trip to Kazakhstan. At least the journey will be daunting.
Liam Devine saying, I have absolutely nothing bad to say about the players. They've turned up from minute one and applied themselves perfectly. The lack of support they are given is an abomination. And big strong words being used today across the chat. I think that is the feeling. There is a feeling that Celtic have been let down to an extent in preparation for this tie, and I think that's a fair enough feeling to have, to be frank with you. Kieran McLeish saying, we're on our own on Wednesday. Board have abandoned us. We have to get behind the team to get us over the line. Again, I think that will sum up a lot of feelings from supporters. It
will, but at the same time, just to reply to that, as much as the board have abandoned us, I look at the two big signings that Celtic have made this summer. I think for many people, they go into most predicted lineups. Kieran Tierney and Benjamin Negrin. So those are players, and I'm not going to be an apologist for the lack of signings or lack of first team signings, but those two, I think at this moment in time, where Benjamin Negrin will play is maybe a different question, but I think both of those players will walk into the starting lineup on Wednesday night. So, those two players, despite the lack of signings in other areas, I think at left back and in midfield or out wide, depending on where Rodgers plays him, I think Benjamin Negrin and Kieran Tierney will play in that game. So, those two players are going to be important for Celtic on Wednesday night. But it's a team game, it's a squad game, and you're hoping everybody that comes onto the pitch can play their part in what will be another special night at Celtic Park.
Yep, we'll leave it there, folks. Starting the week, setting the tone for the week. Big week for Celtic. We'll be back again. Of course, we've got the Celtic Way Weekly coming in this evening with myself and Hamish. Interesting chat on that, so check that out if you want. Be back tomorrow with morning briefing. We've got other stuff coming up on the channel. I'm speaking to the former technical director of the Kazakhstan Football Federation, Ryan. That will be on the channel in advance of the tie on Wednesday night as well. So we're going to be finding all about this team, all about Kazakhstan football in advance of Wednesday night. Lots going up on the website as well. We'll be having stuff in advance of the Kairat game on Wednesday, as well as all the news, all the latest news as well. So check that if you want. Ryan, any final thoughts before we head off? For another huge week for Celtic.
We're one briefing closer to the Champions League game, and I'm just really looking forward to it. It's already the highlight of your week, isn't it? Yep. Champions League football, even though it's a qualifier, it's still Champions League football. There's a lot riding on it, and Celtic more often than not turn up in these games than not. So looking forward to Wednesday night, and looking forward to covering the club ahead of a massive week for the club.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for joining us in the live chat. Thanks everyone for joining us in the comments below. Let us know what you think of Wednesday night's game and how you feel it will go. As I say, we'll be back later on this afternoon. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Until next time, we'll see you on